Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'll try again. Can I have some sound? Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'll try again. Welcome back. There you go. That's better. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Every great story has a protagonist and an antagonist. Harry Potter, Gone with the Wind, Star Wars, and the same is true for brands. Truth, Arnold Worldwide's anti-smoking campaign hates lies. Having an enemy keeps you on your toes, it keeps you focused on winning, it makes you a better competitor, and it leads to better creative work. For a discussion on the role of the enemy in brand building today, please welcome now Pete Favart, the Chief Creative Officer at Arnold Worldwide.
Thank you. Thanks. Hello, everybody. Whoa, it's kind of loud. Let's see. You tweeting down here. I'm at Pete Favart, by the way. And you need an enemy. We all need an enemy. Because no one cares what we have to say as individuals. Let me say that again. No one gives a fuck about what we have to say. Now, we have to remember that every time we start a creative project. And I want to bring someone out on stage who really knows, is an expert at getting people's attention. So I want to bring out Shepard Fairey.
Thanks, Pete. So anybody that maybe doesn't know who I am or what I do, I'm an artist, graphic designer, activist, street artist, and sometimes I work in the advertising and design world commercially. And I think that indifference is the enemy.
We're here today to talk about stories, and what we do is, in this industry, whether you're a graphic designer, you're a musician, you're an artist, you're a filmmaker, is we're all storytellers. But a lot of times we forget the fundamentals of telling a story. Every great story requires an antagonist and a protagonist. Up on this screen right here are some of the most read books ever written. They're all clear examples of a good guy, a bad guy, and it goes through the film industry as well. Right? You see Jaws, The Godfather, Star Wars, even kids' films. Imagine Jaws without the shark. It'd be the worst fucking movie you've ever seen. It would be like somebody's family vacation in Martha's Vineyard. So if there wasn't an antagonist of that shark, plus John Williams' great music, da-dum, da-dum, that movie would be boring as shit. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Having an enemy, having a strong antagonist, actually setting up a problem can make you the solution. And it's a cognitive thing. Our brains are wired for this. Think about that for a second. Our brains mechanically are wired for this. I say, Shepard, I say black,
White,
day,
night.
sometimes there's some asshole who says gray, or afternoon. Shepard wasn't even thinking about that. That was just a mechanical, automatic reaction. So with that, black, white, day, night, those are the polar opposites. Those are the extremes. Our brains require those polar opposites to engage, to think, right? And I think a lot of the problem with a lot of art, a lot of advertising, a lot of design, is that it shoots right down the middle to make everyone happy. Everyone just wants to be happy. But when you just make yourself happy, or your clients happy, then is anyone out there in the audience going to be really happy?
Probably not. And a lot of clients start off very fearless, but then as they become more established, they want to play it safe, and you have to remind them that that's not the way to keep things moving forward.
And it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of determination, a lot of grit, and to remind them of those two opposites, that enemy, that protagonist, and that antagonist. Think about this. Think about religion. Think about Christianity. How thick would the Bible be without the devil, without hell? It'd be a little booklet that said, God's awesome. He's really great. He's got a lot of power.
Like him or don't like him, there's no consequence. You know?
And that's the point, though, right? There's no consequence. There's no commitment. If we didn't have hell, then heaven wouldn't be so great. If you didn't have something to push against, would heaven or Christianity be something I need to worship? Think about that for a second.
A point of view is essential, even if it's a bad point of view. Look, Glenn Beck's got an audience. You know, Rush Limbaugh's got an audience. But you know, the people care if you have a strong point of view with what you're doing, and so it's essential to finding an audience and connecting with an audience.
And you know, the two of us talk a lot about this. Shepard, of course, one of us on stage is pretty damn famous. That we talked a lot about this in that, what does it take for work? So like this poster behind us for We Can Do It. At the time, the enemy was a literal enemy. It was the Nazis and the Japanese and the Nazi takeover of Europe, the threat to American freedom. And this poster came out, and I don't think the creator of it intended the power that this poster had. But it's interesting for me to look at, and Shepard's got a real great perspective on this too. This poster rallied women in America to make something that they were not naturally inclined to do. Make weapons of destruction, make weapons to kill people. Mm-hmm. That was a powerful enemy that rallied people together to do something that they weren't naturally born to do. And this poster became, out of all the graphics that were created in the 1940s, this poster is still alive today. I'm sure you see this around wherever you go. And there's a lot of meaning to it. Like you were telling me last night about...
Well, even if this poster was initially designed to just encourage women to do something they weren't naturally inclined to do, it became a symbol of women's power and equality, that a woman could do anything a man could do. And that really was constantly reinforced as the image circulated over the years. Well, recently Swiffer, the little mop company, they did an ad with a woman dressed like Rosie the Riveter holding her mop, and people online went crazy. The backlash was huge, and it was because the inference of the Swiffer ad was continue to play into a historical role, don't progress as a woman, don't empower yourself. And whether that was the intended result of this poster in the first place, it became its own thing, and it's powerful that way.
It might be too that the creators of that campaign didn't understand the historic or the meaning of it, the cultural relevance of that poster.
They understood the appeal to women, but not why.
Right. So we're going to talk a little bit about why you should stuff your face with culture and why you should stay relevantly understand it, what's going on around you right now, and how to get that into your work. So here's another point that we really want to get across. And think about this for a second. And it's funny because I'm kind of a real geek about words and where they came from. I'm a real history geek and thinking about what was the root of where certain things come from. So without tension, no one pays attention. If there isn't tension in a message, and I don't mean negative, I don't mean to go off and make things that are negative or hypercritical about things, but if there isn't that antagonist and protagonist, why would I engage? Why would I ever pay attention to it? And that's what led me to think it's maybe that word attention, and what do I know? I'm just hypothesizing here. Maybe that word attention is, or the root word for that was tension. Because when you think of it, if we put tension into our work, and I think, again, Shepard's an expert at this, that people will engage. People will look, turn their head, say, huh, what? Oh, look at that. Which is, it's our job, right? Our job is to get people to care about what we do. So before, when I said no one cares about what you say, it's our job, it's our industry's job to make people care. So tension is an interesting way to get people to pay attention and to care. We're going to get into a little bit of cultural context now. You can see up here, it was chaos in America. It was actually chaos globally in the 1960s. We had Vietnam raging. We had assassinations to amazing people like Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy. You had rock stars committing suicide. We had civil rights atrocities happening in our country and actually globally. But even in Europe and Northern Ireland, what was going on in 1969. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it from a graphic design perspective, something that popped out of all of this was this tiny little symbol that still, today, is recognized by every man, woman, and child alive.
It's such a simple, iconic image, and it began. It was created in 1958 as an anti-nuclear proliferation symbol, and then somehow took hold. And there've been plenty of symbols for peace historically. For hundreds of years before that, there's the dove with the olive branch, but this reduced it to something that could be on a button, in a fabric design, on a T-shirt, woven into psychedelic album art. And it became, first of all, a really strong symbol of counterculture defiance against the war, which was being allowed to continue or embraced by the mainstream culture. But you saw a tipping point as the counterculture actually became the dominant culture. And a symbol like this that was very easy for people to share, it became viral, it became a meme, was something that was really at the forefront of taking that counterculture perspective and pushing it into the dominant culture. And I think it probably helped that there was a lot of great music and musicians that were pushing this, but the power of a easily recognizable symbol to proliferate is, you can't underestimate it.
And it also, to the point, had this tremendous enemy that it was pushing against. Same thing with Tommy Smith and John Carlos, 1968 Olympics. Everyone, when they did this, as opposed to putting their hand on their heart after winning the gold and silver medals in 1968, that little gesture made everyone pause and a collective sigh at the moment. A lot of you are too young to remember this as I look out in this audience. But this stopped everything. Everything stopped. Because they did something that they weren't supposed to do. At the time, oppression against African American people, weakness as a race to push against and really pop through and make a statement. There was a lot of people who were trying to do it. But these two guys at the 1968 Olympics popped through with one simple gesture. This also became a massive a graphic symbol. Yeah,
the fist had always been a symbol of power, but the way in which the Black Power movement, the Black Panthers used it. The Black Panthers had been marginalized and were basically systematically eradicated by J. Edgar Hoover. And for those two guys in the Olympics to say, we're part of the most mainstream activity in America, and yet we're also part of this other thing, was an incredibly powerful gesture, and it just reinforced the meaning of the symbol and pushed it further.
At the same time, you see these stills, and I don't know if you guys all remember this. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. It was called Hilltop, Coca-Cola, 1969, I believe. At the time of this rage, this turmoil, this conflict, I mean, I was a little boy, and I remember watching the body bags coming off of planes every night on the news. This one little commercial came on TV, collecting young people from all over the world on this little hill in Italy, all singing this song about basically what Rodney King said years later: can't we just all get along? But Coca-Cola, again, magic in a bottle, was going to be the symbol of this togetherness. So this enemy, this cultural context, can easily work its way into those of us in the room who make advertising, who make marketing. And if you understand what's going on in culture, if you can push against it, that's happening right now, your work will be way more relevant to the people who are seeing it. And it's funny because this spot, 1969, 1970, is still alive in a spirit. I think this was created last year, 2 years ago, which did very well in all the award shows and became very, very famous. But it's funny how that brand, that Coca-Cola, they linked that past to the present. And just seeing this had such power, right? There's another thing, too, and I think that Shepard is remarkable at this, and it's a very hard thing to do, about communicating with visuals. Sometimes we don't need words. Sometimes the power of a simple visual, like the peace symbol, like this Coke ribbon sharing and a logo, is such a powerful thing. It also, because of social media, the power of social media, the power of sharing, cutting across channels and talking to the masses, excuse me, there isn't any breakdown in language. I think everybody who sees this understands it immediately. And it's something to think about as we create work for the digital future and the digital present.
As far as Coke goes, Andy Warhol, when he portrayed the Coke bottle as one of his icons, did a repeating motif, same thing that he did with the Campbell's soup can. He said, I drink the same Coca-Cola that the Queen drinks, that the person who lives on the street drinks. It was, there was an equality that was implicit in Coke, and I think that, that comes through in how they've done a lot of their advertising, and whether you think they're a great brand or not, they've done it very effectively. And Andy Warhol, utilizing Coke, wasn't pandering to the to the broadest audience, because his audience, in a lot of ways, was the art world, and it was actually going very much against the current to utilize mundane pop subject matter in the art world. So context is very important in all of this.
It again, pushing off of what's popular or unpopular at the time. So we wanted to break it down a little bit in this next section and focus on technology and what happened, what was going on with technology. Paul Rand, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Paul Rand designed this. At the time, IBM, big threatening. Technology was extremely threatening. People weren't quite sure about what to do with it. Fear existed. People thought, even back in the 20s, that technology, with Metropolis, I think the movie was, that society was going to become automated. And Paul Rand, I mean, a brilliant graphic designer, one of the best graphic designers of all time, decided to organize this logo in such a way to really break it down, make it simple, make it not threatening. It turned into, being called Big Blue as a corporation. And Shepard, what do you call this when I keep forgetting, the I and the B.
Pictogram?
A pictogram,
Yeah.
Thanks. Sometimes I'm an idiot. But even getting it down to a pictogram to make it friendly and simple. What's interesting, though, about in technology is that at that time, in 1984, gosh, some of you probably have never seen it. Maybe you have. I have. Old guys have. 1984, Apple launched Macintosh. This is considered the best commercial of all time, shot by Ridley Scott. At the same time, Apple was saying, don't be like IBM. Don't fall into the Big Brother system. Don't let people tell you what to think and how to think. So it's interesting what's going on here, right? Technology created a lot of fear and confusion and complexity. Paul Rand tried to straighten it all out, make it kind of linear and easy to understand. And then Apple comes in and says, no. They're trying to take over. They're trying to watch everything you do. And don't pay attention to that. Don't fall into George Orwell's theory of what the future is like. Meanwhile, Stanley Kubrick is making 2001: A Space Odyssey. And he's also talking about the automation of society and how technology is going to ruin us. So it's funny how a lot of symbols, a lot of graphic design, a lot of films, and a lot of great marketing came out of that fear that we all embrace with technology about how threatening it can be, about how confusing it can be. And I would say, when we sat down to do this, there's a lot of great work that was created because of that fear, because of the enemy of confusion. It even goes further than these three examples.
I mean, Apple as the anti-homogeny company, 1984 won't be like 1984 because of the Macintosh. Even though they're the most profitable corporation on the planet, they still somehow have convinced all of us that we're more unique, more creative if we use their products, and I'm a sucker. I do it. So
yeah, me too. I'm a total sucker. We're your friend.
So this was a big influence for me, Russian constructivist design, and both visually and philosophically, I think that this is fascinating work because during the Russian Revolution, there was a sense of overthrowing the corrupt regime and initiating a sense of equality and eradicating poverty. And the design around it was really to encourage people to support the greater good, produce, and and you could also say that the danger of that is forfeiting your own identity for someone else's agenda. But the utopian idea was that it was for the collective good. Now, since we know the history of communism, a lot of people have feared this kind of design, which I think reduces things to the most powerful color palette, really, really stylish, elegant design, simple compositions that cut through the clutter and grab your attention, and make great work. I've utilized this kind of design in my work, actually, as a way to grab people's attention, but also to cloak something in what could be perceived as a sinister package with what I think is benevolent content. Meanwhile, much of the communications that are out there have a more sinister agenda packaged in a benevolent way, and we'll get to the Truth Campaign later, but a lot of that has been, the tobacco industry's practices have been well deconstructed by the Truth Campaign. So yeah, here are a couple pieces of mine that have utilized the principles, I think, of Russian constructivism visually, but to very different ends philosophically. The Bush piece on the left, this is about critiquing Bush at a time when most people were censoring themselves because Bush had said, "You're either with us or you're with the terrorists." And I said, well, I'm definitely not with the terrorists or with you. But that was the official presidential portrait. And this is, I'm just briefly going to touch on copyright, but this was, my transformation of the official presidential portrait, which is very much intended to be an irreverent statement. And everyone now, I think, looks back and says Bush was one of the worst presidents ever. But in 2003, most of the country, he had a very high approval rating. And so that was obviously in opposition to Bush. But then in 2008, most people had gotten discouraged by Bush, discouraged by the wars, but there was a lot of cynicism in culture. And to me, the enemy was that apathy and cynicism, because a fear that the political process would not yield anything good for America, I thought was a very, very troubling way for the country to go. So seeing merit in Barack Obama's policy positions, not all of which I've seen any good action on, but that's a different discussion. At the time, I felt that sincerely supporting Barack Obama with a piece of propaganda. I think you have to accept that visuals are propaganda if you're trying to persuade people. It has a negative connotation, but that's just being honest. But that was a sincere support for Obama's presidency, and I think that one of the reasons it did become the symbol that it did, and it did take hold with people the way it did, was because there was so much negativity that people were looking for something hopeful to grasp onto, looking for something optimistic.
It's also interesting because Shepard's work, before I ever met Shepard, I was asked to deconstruct the Obama poster for the Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston. And I said, well, you guys must have called the wrong person because I've never met Shepard, I've never talked to him about it. And I said, no, that's exactly what we want. We want your opinion of how it got to it. And it was funny because about a month later, the two of us met in New Orleans. We were down there together for a show. And I was embarrassed, I was really sensitive about it, and I said, you know, I was asked, it was a big show at the ICA. I think you were arrested at that show.
Yeah, I was.
The Boston police, scumbuckets that they are, decided to take, now I'm probably on a list, decided to take Shepard in. And it was a really very bad situation. But the only thing I could think of was that, well, Shepard must have really strong feelings about the right side. He must have really strong feelings about what's going on in the country and the direction that we were taking in America. Because to me, I looked at this poster and I said, this is, Shepard's palette is usually not like this palette. He decided to do something really radically different than he had done. But also, to me, everything about it, the angle of the head, which is this AP photo, which is a whole other story, I guess, and the way he's positioned, also taking that photograph, and this is all purely my point of view, and making a hard graphic of it, took a real human being and made him mythic, made him larger than life. And graphic design can do that. And the one slide on the way over here this morning, I said, oh, fuck, I forgot one of the slides, the Che Guevara logo. And you guys have all seen that, I'm sure, and it's probably completely meaningless what Che Guevara stood for to a lot of people, yet you still walk around and you see it on bags and on t-shirts and everything. And what he represented was something very passionate and very strong. But when someone took that photograph and made a hardline graphic of it, he became mythic and he lasted forever in our minds. And also, it makes it very easy, as Shepard said before about the peace symbol, it makes it very transferable across many things by making these hardline graphics.
And you know, in terms of looking at your enemy with the Obama poster, in some ways, my own anti-establishment stance and my own conception of myself as a rebel was, I felt if I just mindlessly adhered to the way I did things usually, I would be my own enemy, because sincerity, when there was an opportunity, I thought, to put someone with a different mindset than most of the politicians to help support them was, I thought, actually a fairly radical thing to do, but it didn't necessarily reinforce what people considered my brand. However, I think that understanding context and adapting to what the needs are in a specific situation, sometimes the thing that abstractly might seem like the conformist thing to do is actually the most radical thing.
Right.
So this is one of the, other than the Obama poster, probably the image I'm best known for, and it was inspired by a few things. Andre the Giant, the wrestler, that's a long story. The movie They Live, Barbara Kruger's graphic design, and Orwell's conception of Big Brother. So in the 90s, when I created this image, I felt that I'd been into the Sex Pistols and their belief in situationism, which we'll get to. I'd studied Heidegger's theory of phenomenology, that people become numb to their surroundings and they need to have experiences that reawaken a sense of wonder. And I felt that most people just didn't question things enough, and most people submitted to covert and overt agendas, laws, rules, messages much more easily than they should. People weren't analytical enough. And the thing that I felt was that a confrontational image that had a bit of a Rorschach test quality that was open to interpretation, with the word obey would make people say, obey what? And then they have to think about all the things that they maybe have been asked to obey, have chosen to obey, and it creates an internal dialogue that I think actually could be very useful. Because I knew that the exercise worked for me.
Marcel Duchamp.
So, this is a great image in terms of this concept because, Duchamp, he was at the forefront of the Dada movement, and one of the ideas was that art had become too precious and too sacred beyond that. It needed to be more accessible, it needed to be more fun, it needed to be more irreverent. So what symbol is there that's a more powerful representation of art history, the art establishment, what everyone is reverent toward than the Mona Lisa? And he called this a modified ready-made. He also, people might know the urinal that he called the fountain and wrote Armut on the side of. But this was, this was him poking fun at the Mona Lisa, and I think that in a lot of ways it opened doors for people to be provocative and antagonistic in art.
And for him, the enemy was the art world as it existed, and the people who are calling things art and say things are art. And his whole thing was, well, actually, the people who say it is, I'm actually against them, because art is whatever we really think it is, or we can make it. And as Shepard said before, the Situationists, I don't know how many people in the audience, I was lucky enough to be able to study these people from France, 1950s. Malcolm McLaren came out of the Situationists, and I think they had this little pact with themselves that whoever became famous had to leave the Situationists, which is kind of funny in a way, because a lot of times the whole notion of creating is to draw attention, right? So Malcolm McLaren was a Situationist. This is the cover of the Sex Pistols album, God Save the Queen. If you don't have it, you should actually listen to it, because it's a fucking amazing album. But the whole idea of defacing anything from the royal family in England. When this showed up, I don't know, again, a lot of young people.
Incredibly
I had to have it.
Incredibly controversial. Jamie Reed, the graphic artist who did this, he basically just cut a picture of the Queen out of the newspaper and did the version with the safety pin and the ransom note letters. And the song itself, is the same title as the God Save the Queen, which is, a very reverent song towards the monarchy. But these, the lyrics to the Sex Pistols, God Save the Queen, are a bit different. God save the Queen, her fascist regime, she made you a moron, a potential H-bomb. So, and this song was banned from the radio, which actually made it that much more popular, much more of a phenomenon. So, it's a perfect example of how a simple twist on something well known can really turn things upside down in a powerful way.
And create desire to have it. So a modern day version of this is, I've actually been following these guys for a while, Free Pussy Riot in Russia, and these girls and their revolt against Vladimir Putin and all of his politics. I think they were at an auto show, and they did a topless protest. They ran in, and they all got arrested. I think there's 2 women still in Russian prisons just for stating their beliefs, just for protesting. And their music is pretty interesting to listen to, but they show up. So, and they just show up kind of like a protest, or like a lot of marketing does today, street brand experience, right? You just show up and people are going to start to care, which most times they don't. But what these guys do, which is really fascinating for me is from a graphic design standpoint, is the juxtaposition of these bright colors and these bright colored ski masks. And when they show up, it's just that, again, a juxtaposition of these happy colors, but their message is so powerful, and they make you pay attention, right? So as we look at this type of stuff, and we think about an enemy, and what we wanted to really do is challenge ourselves and say, like, all right, it's easy to pick on the Sex Pistols and Free Pussy Riot and things like that, and Marcel Duchamp. But the point is, again, getting back to what nobody cares what we have to say in the marketing business and in the storytelling, like us as storytellers, we really do have to think about what we need to push against, the resistance that we need to push against to create. Because art does need resistance. And the challenge here was, okay, well, Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are. I don't know how you all felt, but when I was a little kid and I saw these illustrations, it kind of freaked me out a little bit. I got a little scared.
Yep.
The hardline etches, the monsters, the way they were drawn, it wasn't like a typical story that my parents would read to me or any kind of children's book that I'd seen before. The enemy here is just growing up, because none of us really wants to ever grow up. At least I don't. I don't think Shepard does. And the idea of growing up is what he pushed against. But the art was so graphic and so powerful. That's really what got people's attention. And that's why today, still, this is probably one of the most beautifully illustrated children's storybooks of all time, because he went the other way. He didn't follow the way storybooks go. He wanted to do something different in the story and in the way he portrayed it.
Well, I think people are seduced by danger. They love horror movies, they love roller coasters, and when I got that book when I was a kid, I actually thought, have my parents actually opened this and looked at it? They usually try to give me very, very saccharine, tame stuff, and I was like, ooh, it was a big coup that
this
I got.
One got through somehow.
Yeah.
All right, so we've been talking a lot about music, illustration, graphic design. Some of us are here in the room to create marketing. One of the easiest examples that we can all probably think of right away is Just Do It. Now, Just Do It, I don't think Nike even uses this anymore, but what this did for such a long period of time was such a great body of work for years and years and years. And what this idea that relied heavily on an enemy of lethargy, of not being lazy, of pushing yourself. Right now they're finding the athlete in all of us is what their mission is. But to find the athlete in all of us means you need to get off your ass and do something. This line was so contextually relevant and so dripping with an enemy. That's why we all, as soon as it came out, went, oh my God, what a powerful idea, these three little words. And that's why most of us in the room, sat in client meetings and say, I want something just like Just Do It. It's like, okay, well, the first thing is, I can't say, I can give you a Just Do It, but we can start to talk about what you're pushing against, who the enemy is in your story.
Yeah, I think the genius of that also was that each person could project their own idea of what that meant for them. So where many things, when they try to be universal, they fail miserably, that actually was a fairly universal slogan. And
it got a lot of people off their asses to actually do something. And the thing that's really cool about that too is, the Fuel Band now, which is an amazing product, amazing device, it hasn't stopped. The enemy hasn't stopped. Actually, what's brilliant about it is that you wear it on your wrist every day. It's a constant reminder of that enemy to push yourself, to keep moving. Whether it's just taking a few steps, playing ping pong, whatever you're doing, it's a constant reminder that that enemy is out there. Yeah. And when you slow down or when you just rest, that's the wrong thing to be doing. So it's funny how that segued into the modern world and modern marketing. Up here is just a few examples of other pieces of marketing. We talked a little bit about Apple. We talked a little bit about Nike. We talked a little bit about Coke. But the Chipotle spot, who doesn't love that? It was the most beautiful piece of communication I've seen in years. And when you think about it, and think about your favorite pieces of marketing that you've ever seen. Really think hard about it. And I bet it's not so far, or it's not so hard to think of the enemy that was, that they used to create that. Chipotle was chemicals in our food, and those evil people at Monsanto who are putting all these chemicals into the food. And Chipotle saying, we're not gonna have it. We're not going to put chemicals in our food. Or Domino's, the Domino's campaign. Oh, yes, we did. It's such a great line. This was one of the bravest acts of marketing by saying our product is the enemy. Our product sucks, and we know it. You told us the product sucked. We agree. and we're going to make it better. So to spend money on marketing, to say that we are the enemy, is extremely brave and very daring thing to do. I actually, we have conversations in our office all the time about who's our enemy, and actually sometimes it's just yourself. Sometimes you are your own enemy, and you have to think about, what do I need to do to change that? Think about Old Spice. Dove was coming out with body wash for men. Old Spice is like, no, whoa, we own men. We're not going to have any of that, so smell like a man, man. Or Got Milk, which we all love. The whole idea of not having milk, or that deprivation strategy with, you're really going to want milk when you bite into that Twinkie or that cupcake or that cookie. And when you don't have milk, you're going to be sorry. So the whole idea there was, just don't ever run out. I'll talk a little bit about truth. Actually, you saw the most interesting man in the world. We were talking about this last night. It's such an interesting idea. And Shepard has a really cool insight on it. That strategy was middle-aged men's biggest fear, is being perceived as boring. So that was the sweet spot in their business. Middle-aged guys, fear of being irrelevant or just being boring, which leads to a brilliant idea of the most interesting man in the world.
But I think that every guy I know has that connection to Fidel Castro, Ernest Hemingway, James Bond. This idea of the guy that the guys admire and the ladies adore, and just has it figured out, just has life figured out. And I think when you're in your 20s, not knowing what kind of person you'll evolve into, this is an appealing campaign. But it also is it's very heavy-handed in terms of the tall tales and the cliches. So there's a sort of postmodern irony. So I think you can be seduced in a very sincere way by the most interesting man in the world, or you can look at it as, well, hey, I'm not manipulated. I'm not susceptible to that. I like it in more of an ironic way, but really you're lying.
Which is, we all fall victim to that. Does anyone know who these guys are? These are the 12 tobacco CEOs of all the major tobacco companies in the United States. They're all standing before Congress, and their line, which they were very well coached by their legal teams, is, I believe nicotine is not addictive. In front of Congress, under oath. If any of us did that, we're all dead. You're going to jail for a long time. Under oath in front of Congress. I believe nicotine's not addictive. The key word there is I believe. I believe in Santa Claus too. It doesn't mean it's a reality. So they got off the hook. They were, okay, great, you guys believe that? It's fine, great. But we're gonna make you pay a lot of money. So they lost the master settlement agreement. It freed up billions of dollars. And because they lied under oath, we created truth. The idea of truth was just to push against the lies and deception of all these people. They sold us manipulation, they sold us poison, they killed our moms, they killed our dads, they killed our aunts, they killed our uncles. Lots of people died because they just wouldn't come out and tell us what they were putting in their products, how they were marketing them to 10-year-old kids. They would never admit that. How they were doing cultural and psychological studies on 10-year-old kids all over the world, and figured that 10-year-old kid is the perfect kid to target. So when all of this information came out because of this master settlement agreement, and all of their internal documents went up online, a group of people started digging them up, and we would start using these documents against them. Probably the most fun I'll ever have in marketing was working on this campaign. And we use this in our company, this enemy notion, to create as many memorable pieces of advertising as we can. And also using strong graphic images to make people pay attention to us. These posters, Phil Graham was our client, and we put these up everywhere. And Phil called me one day, all giddy, and he said, oh my God, the phone is ringing off the hook. So many people are pissed off and complaining they want us to take them all down. And I said, well, aren't you mad? Aren't you upset? He said, no, are you kidding? This is the best day of our life. We got so many people upset and angry. And it's like, but usually that's a bad thing. He goes, no, they're listening to us. They're paying attention. We've done it. We've got their attention, and it's really working. And it takes a brave client. It takes a brave person to be in that camp. So today we're going to wrap it up.
I want to say one more thing about the Truth campaign that I love. It's the first marketing campaign designed to tell you not to buy something.
Yeah, that's actually, it's the only campaign where you actually want sales to go down in our business, and we're pretty proud of that. It's very insightful. So we're wrapping up now. We've run out of time. But one of the things that the two of us wanted to leave you with is hopefully this has inspired you. Hopefully that it has maybe shaken something loose. I think a lot of people say to me about this concept is, you know, it's like it was there in front of me the whole time, and I just didn't realize it's kind of a simple idea. It's not rocket science, and neither one of us is claiming to be setting forth something brand new or unlocking some magic box for all of you to go out and create. But it's a simple notion to keep in mind, and to tell yourselves and also tell our clients, tell all your clients, you know, art needs resistance. Creativity to create engagement needs an antagonist and a protagonist. And that's why I wanted legendary, amazingly talented man like Shepard to join me. Thank you for doing that, by the way.
Thanks. He said all the smart stuff. To add to this concept, I just think that what's sort of in the sweet spot of culture is always short-lived, because quickly what's the leading edge becomes the status quo, then the status quo becomes the orthodoxy, and you always have to look for your way to stand out and rattle things and push things forward, shake up the status quo. So.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you very much then to Pete Favart and Shepard Ferry for joining us here this afternoon. I want to remind you, of course, that there are workshop programs running today. If you missed this morning's session from Circus, it will be running again at 3:30 p.m. in the workshop rooms. When you return here, please, at 3 o'clock, you will hear from the Japanese advertising agency Hakuhodo. See you back here in about 10 minutes. Thank you.